Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our latest episode of Mornings with Mayesh. I'm Yvonne, and thank you guys for joining me. You guys probably hear my puppy because, of course, I'm starting and now he's getting upset. Can you guys hear him? Hopefully not. All right, guys, I am very excited about today. I think it's such an important topic, and we're going to continue the conversation. I'm here today with my friend, the Flower Guy Bron. And last time he was my guest, we talked about luxury and conservative weddings, creative inspiration, and so much more. I remember captain of this creative ship. That was everyone's favorite quote from that show. And if you guys know Bron, you know he is a brilliant speaker who's not only creative, but very, very passionate. And I love how he speaks. I'm so excited to have him on, you guys. You have no idea. And so today we are, again, shifting that conversation from the last time we spoke back to the important topic of diversity and inclusivity. So very, very glad to have him on with me today. Before we get started, though, I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes to come on in, say good morning, and we will get started then after I go through a few housekeeping points. Hi, Huntress Florals. Hi, Penny. How are you guys? I know he's calmed down, but like right when it starts, you know what I mean? All right, guys. Make sure if you are new to the show, if you have any questions, be sure to post them in the comments. And that if we have time, we will definitely cover them. Also, I wanted to just address, last week, I'm trying to look at the post real quick. So last week, about 5 days ago, we posted onto our Instagram asking people to let us know any kind of Black businesses in our industry that we should be highlighting. So that way we can kind of put together a guide. So we're in a list. We're working on that. You guys literally blew us away with the amount of responses. And so I have a team working on that. We're hoping to have that done on Friday, if you guys are wondering. So thank you for that. Also wanted to let you know, if you can't stay for the whole show, that is okay. We are going to be posting the replay up on our blog, on YouTube, and we create a podcast out of this. So you can catch us later if you need to leave. I know life is calling and sometimes you can't stay for the whole thing, but I have a feeling that you guys are going to want to hear everything that Bron has to say. And I hope that you listen to the whole episode. Also wanted to let you know and put up our link so that way you can subscribe. Here is the link to subscribe up on the screen. I'm going to put it in the comments as well. That way you guys are in the know of any Mayesh news, our shows, all of this fun stuff. So stay up to date with what's going on. And also, as I mentioned before, all of our Mornings with Mayeshes go up onto our blog. And so it's just blog.mayesh.com if you want to check it out. Right now, it's a whole lot of Mornings with Mayesh content, just because that's what we've had time to do. And we've been doing a ton of shows. We have some other things in the works in terms of content, but that's kind of the main thing right now. So if you want to catch up, that is a great place to go and do that. All right, guys. Hi, Tarika. How are you? Good morning. Penny is enjoying her tea in her Mornings with Mayesh cup. I love it. I love it. That's amazing. All right, guys, I'm going to bring on Bron and we're going to get started. Hey, Bron. How are you?
Hey, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, and thank you for coming on this show. Like I said, I'm very excited. I think this conversation is so important, and we're just want to kind of keep it going and keep the momentum. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, I would love for you to introduce yourself in case people don't know who you are, and tell us a little bit about your flower story.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Bron Hansborough, more affectionately referred to as the Flower Guy Bron, or just the Flower Guy. So I really don't even go by Bron anymore. It's the Flower Guy.
The flower guy.
And yeah, the Flower Guy. And so I own and operate the Flower Guy Bron, which is a bespoke floral and event design studio in Richmond, Virginia. And I will note that Richmond, Virginia is the capital of the Confederacy. So it does contribute to this story and to some of the messaging that we'll talk about today. So I think it's important to know contextually, where I have grown up and where I operate my business. So we focus on multicultural events. We focus on serving clients of all different backgrounds, and diversity has been a paradigm in our business from day one. So it's a great moment for me now to be able to take a paradigm of my business and my personal beliefs and be able to share those with a ever growing event community. And just kind of giving the disclaimer, I am not uh, you know, preparing myself to be the voice of all Black people. I am not preparing myself to, for every word that I say to be agreed on with everyone. But what my goal is with every conversation that I'm having on this subject matter is to give different context and to provide stories. I think that the best way that we can move the needle forward is for us to understand where we come from and the different things that make us special. We live in probably one of the biggest melting pots in the world where so many different cultures come together. And I think because we're in proximity to so many different cultures, we feel like there's an understanding. But the reality of the matter is that through storytelling and listening and providing appropriate context, I think that conversations will be much more easier. And I think that people's ability to shift their focus and their thought process will be enhanced through us providing these stories. So it's a pleasure being on with you today and sharing, my thoughts and some of the things that I feel like we can do differently to better our floral community.
I love what you were just saying about people's perspective in the context of their story, because I think that's so important, and I think people forget about that. As a matter of fact, I was just having a conversation with my oldest daughter's BFF, who is Black,
Mhm.
beautiful Black soccer player. They have like BFF sweatshirts, blonde BFF and brunette BFF. So super cute. But we were just talking about what's going on in our country, and just our differences in viewpoints and things like that. But we talk about the context and in our different experiences, and I think that's just really important. Everyone has had a different experience. I don't think it's good to assume one way or another, no matter what the skin color of the person is. And so again, telling these stories and giving people platforms to do that, I think is just really, really important, and especially right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so the first question, we you I contacted you because I saw you doing an interview last week, and you were talking about um I'm going
Unity through
blank.
community.
Unity through
There we go.
community.
Yep.
Yes. Unity through community. And I loved what you were saying. I reached out right away. And so I wanted again for you to be able to talk about that. And let's just start off with why unity through community and what's the
Yes.
story behind it.
Absolutely. So I have been in the event industry for 6 years full time, or yeah, 6 years full time, and I have experienced countless um, moments that I can only tie the negative parts of those moments to racism. I am not the type of person who relies on what people have called the race card, and I think that honestly that term should be buried, because for centuries or for generations it has been you know unsavory for a Black person to express how they feel, and how their race is either manipulated, or how their race plays a role in how they've been treated, and speaking to that. So I have experienced so many different things, whether it's a matter of vendors not referring when obviously the style that the client was looking for, I'm the only person to do it. I've seen it in the ballrooms in terms of my team not being welcomed. I've seen it in professional settings at conferences who did not want to hear certain content specifically related to embracing the Black event community. I've seen it in networking organizations where diversity goals were not supported, verbally not supported. So I have experienced it from a personal perspective, from a business perspective, whether it's at a venue performing my work, or whether it was interpersonal with vendors, and professionally speaking and in networking. So I've experienced racism in this industry at every different level. And at a certain point, you have to decide, okay, what are we going to do about this? So I was just sharing with you earlier that, when I was taking my break, like everyone was during COVID, I was resting my mind and getting really quiet and preparing myself for something. Had no clue that George Floyd or Ahmaud, any of those people would ever have been a part of this storytelling. And since now they are, now I feel like my silence needs to end, and I need to speak directly to racism in our industry because it is apparent. And so, unity through community is a demonstration of a steadfast commitment from the events community to stand against racism. It is not geared towards, let's just kind of let it go. Let's just see what happens. It is an active movement. It's an active movement that anyone in our industry can get behind by simply using a hashtag. Now, I could say that, some people may use the hashtag and not truly be behind it, but I'm not here to judge anyone's intent. I'm not here to judge anyone's heart. I'm only here to judge people's actions. And I think that, the industry needed a unifying message. The Black events community, the white events community, the Latino events community, the gay events community, all of us, every group of people that is represented in the industry that we love, should all be behind unifying. And so, unity through community, again, is just a steadfast commitment to moving the race needle forward in our industry.
I love it, and I think it's so important to have that unifying message,
Yeah.
and also I love the positivity behind it as well. Even like Kristen last week was talking about healing through creativity and his viewpoint on everything, and I just think just in general, just in life, just putting more positivity out there, sharing your stories, supporting people, I think is a really powerful way to do things and
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
create some change.
Absolutely. And to put a little context on positivity and how we can look at some of the things that may be uncomfortable that we would normally equate to negativity, or, our discomfort is never usually a positive thing. But I would challenge everyone who is uncomfortable and doesn't really get what's happening to know that that discomfort for a lot of us is the positive move. The fact that you're now thinking differently and your perspective may be changing and you're giving some credence to some things that you never had to give credence to before, and have some really strong realities occur to you. That is positive. As uncomfortable as it is, embrace it, and let's use that energy to further the conversation. So yes, it might not be comfortable, but it still could be very positive.
Yes, yes, and this is a really great example because
Mhm.
I'm uncomfortable. We were just talking about the uncomfortability of this whole conversation and doing it live in this
Yeah,
type of platform.
yeah,
If you asked me a couple months ago if I would be doing something like this, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to talk about flowers and
right,
design and just all the pretty stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, I think change and being uncomfortable is important. And, just in life in general, I think that's a good way of going about life. Okay. So you mentioned briefly a few examples of racism in within the industry that you've experienced, but do you want to talk a little bit more in particular about what has happened? Do you have any stories that you
Yeah,
want to
so
share?
I do have a couple of different stories, and I'm not in the business of pointing fingers and name calling. Everything that I share is with a constructive purpose.
Mhm.
So, and I'm also not going to give specific names, but I do want to give a more in-depth experience so that people can understand what actually happens, not all the time, but what actively happens in our industry. So, to give you the perspective of the Flower Guy Bron as a vendor. So I had the opportunity to serve a fabulous couple at probably one of the most exclusive venues in the city of Richmond. It's a members only club, and it has a staunch history of being extremely conservative. And conservative is the kind way of putting it. It is a historically racist institution. And you, as a woman, could not walk in there by yourself. So that puts it in perspective. It's
Right.
not just a Black thing, it is a superiority thing for white men. And so had some reservations and some concerns about working in the venue, expressed those concerns to the planner. And it was, I had the belief that we were going to move in a good direction, and got there and was immediately met with sheer aggression. My team was told by the banquet staff, the banquet lead of all people, no shade, but the banquet lead told me and my team that I need to get the F out of the way. What? And we're the only, I can't think of any Black vendors that service that venue. Not one. There's none on the preferred vendors list. The preferred vendors list is impenetrable. If you're not a friend of the person who runs the venue, you're not getting in there. So for me to even get there was really not supposed to happen, but it did. And once I got there, they made it very clear that I was not welcome. During my flip, the room flip, my pipe and drape poles were hidden when no one else should ever have been in the space. The room was clear, but the poles that I needed to do my flip to bring a structure downstairs were hidden from me until we had to find them in the opposite side of the room behind pipe and drape that was still up. That's not a coincidence. And then as we are setting up that piece, we were told by the event person that if you can't get it up, you need to take it down. And that is in front of every other collaborative partner in that room. All of the photographers, the videographers, the bakers, all of the staff supporting that event. That was what came out of her mouth directly towards me and my team. And then to put icing on the cake, we were taking a team picture long before the crowd came in front of a $20,000 installation, as we should have, as we were proud of it. And she
Right.
told us that we needed to leave the area immediately, as if I'm not sensitive to flow and not familiar with how luxury events work. So that was what we experienced as a vendor. As a networking, from a networking perspective, I've experienced when I proposed a diversity goal for a major national networking group that has local chapters all across the country. As a board member, I proposed a diversity goal, and only myself and the Black president of the organization at the time of all the board members supported the goal. And no and diversity was told to me, well, diversity can be a lot of different things, Bron. Diversity could be more florists, more caterers, more photographers, and other vendor categories. It does not have to be specific to race. So there we go again. And then lastly, from a conference in continuing education, because keep in mind, these are the organizations that are teaching us.
Right.
I proposed the topic to a national conference, one of the largest, and the topic was embracing the Black events community. And I was told in my feedback when I was not accepted, and that's not the hard feeling because I am highly sought after, so I can find another event. I was told in my feedback, love Braun, hate the topic. We would be open to this topic if it included other communities. So that is what racism looks like in our industry. Is it always overt? No, but they're called microaggressions and biases that we all have about other communities that we have to buckle down and address. So I again am not I am not finger pointing. I am not trying to desecrate what people have worked for. I think that most organizations have great intentions, but I think that it's pretty ironic that the topics that have been proposed specific to race were not worthy of a mention, but now they're the center of our universe and our conversation. So I think it just speaks to making a conscious effort to be on the right side of history the first opportunity you get, because then you don't have to worry about reaching back out and saying, we missed the mark. You don't have to worry about that. You can be proud and say that we were leaders of this conversation long before it was a popular topic. So those are some examples of things that I have experienced directly in this industry, in addition to multiple other stories that I could give you. But I think it was important that I give you perspective as a Black vendor, as a Black networker, and also as a Black educator in this industry. So as I've experienced it on every single side.
Yeah, my first word that comes in my mind when I'm hearing those is just like unbelievable, even though
Mhm.
this is your story. I just don't want to believe it. I don't want to know that people are still treated that way. I can't even imagine how that felt, to have gone through that. And I'm, ugh, I'm sorry that you did.
Well, thank you. And it's not your responsibility to apologize. It's just our collective responsibility to hold platforms like that accountable, to make sure that diversity is important to you, and that in your feedback at conferences, in your feedback to your networking events, and in your feedback to your vendor partners, that diversity is important to me. So you don't have to apologize, but I do appreciate it and understand where you're coming from.
Right, right. Thank you. I know. And before we were talking too, before the show started, I did mention, you know, diversity and inclusion is important to us, but it isn't something that we did with intention, really. We just share what is we're tagged in, and we don't really check who's behind the company, or different designers that we work with, or speakers that I have here on the show. It just kind of just flows, and that's the way we go with it. And so I feel like for us in our company, and kind of what I do for Mayesh, it's just an eye opening of we need to do better and being more intentional of
Mhm.
what we do and why we're
Absolutely.
doing it.
And to piggyback on that, most of you might not know, but I'm a former educator. And I think back to people might wonder, how in the world do class schedules and figure out where all of these kids go? But it always starts with identifying the students who need certain things first. And we identify those students and we place them first. And then everything else revolves around those things. So whatever those needs were become your paradigms and the things that you operate and stand on, because we got to do that. So diversity, inclusion, in particularly race. And that's why I have to always say a conversation about diversity is not a conversation necessarily about race. And the conversation that I am having is race specific diversity. So when you think about your organizations and your invites, for example, you start your invites with a minority list. Start there, because we have to plan with diversity and in the forefront. It has to be built into our structure in everything we do. When we're thinking about vendors, what does my vendor selection look like? What does my vendor list look like? How about I start my vendor list with a diverse candidate in every single category to make sure that everyone is fairly represented. So, right, it's just about a matter of being intentional with our decision making.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And you touched on it a little bit, about how it needs to be about race. And I did get a
Mhm.
question from a viewer,
Yeah.
and she wanted to know if right now with the talks that we're doing, if we're including other minorities. And so I know that you have some thoughts on that, Bron. Do you want to?
Yeah, certainly. This is a very touchy statement. It's a very touchy
Yes.
conversation. I think any conversation related to race is a touchy conversation, and we all owe it our soul and our heart to approach it very carefully. And so my response to that is, right now, the Black community is receiving attention, very positive attention, if you ask me, that we have never received before. We have received countless emails, calls with people who are wanting to support, who have not known what to do, have not felt like they had a voice, felt like, if they made a statement, they would lose their businesses. Because again, like I mentioned, I'm in the capital of the Confederacy, and there are businesses who make all of their money serving plantation style weddings. So, what does that business owner who may be an ally or want to be an ally but doesn't know how to shift their business? There's so many stories stories out there. But what I want to say is the Black community has never had this much attention or support in this country. I feel very different about what's happening socially and seeing the faces that are supporting this movement, not just unity through community, but healing our nation. And I am not diminishing the stories of any other community, but right now, because the light is being shed on the Black community, I feel all communities, whether you're a community of color or not, need to focus their attention right now on supporting the Black community. And I encourage any other underserved or underrepresented population of people, community of people, to do the same thing we're doing so that we can lend our support to you. So it's not a matter of splitting hairs about who has been done the most wrong in this country. I think our country has a lot of conversations to have with a lot of groups. But right now, let's take advantage of the beauty that so many people are willing to get behind a mission and a agenda that is supportive of all people. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very well said. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So, what are your suggestions for like the first steps in having a healthy conversation about race? How can we do this?
Absolutely. I think, before having the conversation, you have to have some reconciliation with yourself first. You have to kind of ask yourself some pretty common questions, so to speak. Maybe, am I racist? Or what is racism to me? What does that look like? Have I been a silent player in the breakdown of our community, whether it's your community you live in or the community that we serve through events? And so ask yourself some really hard questions. And once you start asking yourself questions, what starts to happen is your reality starts to shift and you open up your mind for possibility for other concepts. So having those groundbreaking and tilling conversations, you don't just spread seed on ground that has not been broken. So we have to break the ground first before we can plant the seed. And then I think the next piece, and in that acknowledgement, is having conversations with people and really starting to understand the context. And again, going back to the stories. And so once you start having these conversations, we know we can't just have the conversation with people who look like us. We
Right.
have to have the conversation with people who don't look like us and have different experiences and be open to hearing that feedback and vulnerable to even having your feelings hurt, or even, feeling like you might even have to apologize for some of the things that you hear. But I think that those conversations and getting that contextual appreciation of other people's stories is really where we start. And then once you start having those conversations, hopefully you start those conversations at home with your husband, your wife, your partner, your spouse, your children, your puppies, whoever lives with you.
Yes.
And then you have those conversations, because it's a grassroots effort. We have those conversations with your community people, the people that you have cocktail hours with, the people that you're social distancing in the yard with, and that you spend casual time with. The elephant is even in the room then. Those are the moments to spark and initiate a conversation about race. And then you take that conversation and you have it in your team, and you look at your team and say, well, what does my team look like? And if your team only looks like you, we have a responsibility to change that and to make sure that your team reflects the landscape of, if you walked out of your door, what do you see? If you see community of vibrant colors of people, that's what our team should look like, because then we can then tailor our marketing to align to a colorful array of clients. So it's really a grassroots effort that starts with a small little snowball, and then as we roll it, it just grows and grows and grows. And then we can hold our vendor partners accountable, then our educational platforms accountable, our conferences accountable. So it all starts with, inside your own head and heart, having those groundbreaking conversations and planting some seeds, and then expanding that conversation out into your community.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so, so important. Something that we've always talked with my children, not my dog, but my children.
I know,
And
right?
but my little ones didn't even know what racism meant. My littlest one still doesn't really get it. She doesn't have the brain
Oh
space
no.
or the attention span to even talk about anything like that. But my oldest, she was, surprised. And I'm in South Florida, so it's literally a melting pot. And
Totally.
we actually picked to live here. There was between two cities that we were considering, and we didn't pick one because I felt like we've had some not so great experiences in terms of race and me seeing it happen, and I didn't want her to grow up. At the time I only had one. I didn't want her to grow up in that environment. So we chose to come to South Florida so that way she would grow up in a more diverse area. But I think when you also start small like that within yourself and within your family where it's a safe space,
Hmm.
then because it's uncomfortable and because you're worried about saying the wrong things or doing the wrong thing, that you can then do that there without feeling like you're doing the wrong thing, and get comfortable with that, and then moving on up the ladder, as you said, Bron.
Yeah.
I think that's all really great stuff. Um, okay. So we're having conversations, we're evaluating things, we're doing those steps, Bron. So after that, how do you suggest for our viewers to kind of keep the momentum going?
Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to challenge even some of my own thoughts right now, because this is such an uncomfortable space that we're sharing together. And I think it's important to note that everyone is sharing the discomfort. Maybe the Black community has been experiencing it for a lot longer, but at this point we're equalized and we're all feeling it together. I would say that because everyone is going to arrive at their own conclusion at different points in time, to rush this discomfort and to get to the next steps would almost be a disservice of the space that we find ourselves in. So I would argue that right now we should be focusing on continuing to have these conversations until we're blue in the face, initiating these conversations and hold here for a little while longer. But however, to speak to the question of, what does it look like moving forward, I would say that we move forward with accountability. I think that so many businesses have made positive statements and affirmations, and denouncing racism within their business and in their industry. In our industry, I think that we need to make sure that everyone that is speaking, everyone that isn't speaking, that we do our due diligence and that we get to understand exactly what their stance is and where they're standing, and hold everyone accountable. I think that that's going to be the best thing. Some of the most impactful things that I think that have happened that I've seen on social media are not necessarily people being called out, but people demonstrating bad behavior on social media platforms that are business owners and that are leaders in the events community, and people literally calling them out and holding them accountable. And it may come across as a negative headhunt, but it's not. It is about a movement, and there's no space for racism in it. There's no space for racism at all in our industry or in our world. Can we eradicate it? I don't know. I'm optimistic that we can make some good headway. I'm sure it will morph and look like something different, like it has evolved throughout time. But no longer can we be silent. So I think the next stage is holding your counterparts accountable. And that's going to be even harder than acknowledging it for yourself, because we have built relationships and we have built vendor teams and we have built platforms all around diminishing the experience or the contribution of another group of people. So having those conversations and saying, hey, this style shoot only has Caucasian players. Like, that's not okay. Are we saying that there are no Black vendors or vendors of color in this community that are not valuable enough to be on this platform with us? So I think the accountability piece is what's next. But I do want to encourage everyone that although this is uncomfortable right now, the discomfort is what is creating the change. And it is a positive shift. So I'm going to rest here for a little while longer and then hold everyone's hand as we start moving forward. But I think that even in this comfort, there is movement forward.
Yeah, I love that. And when I was just looking through like social media feeds and things like that, just checking out who's saying what and who's doing what, and just trying to be more aware
Mhm.
of our landscape in the industry. I am surprised to see some non-responses by some certain companies,
Mhm.
and obviously I know that sometimes it, like for Mayesh, for example, we're like a really big company. So there is a lot of conversations that were happening before we decided to say anything or, just figure out what
Mhm.
we wanted to do. So I don't want to judge too soon. Um,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
after some time, I think people definitely need to at least start having conversations publicly about their company and about what they want to do and how they want to be. But if there's companies out there and you're saying hold people accountable,
Mhm.
how do you do that? Like,
Yeah. So, and I'm so glad you asked because I've been thinking about it myself. So,
yeah.
I acknowledge that everyone has their own scope of influence and their own methodology.
Hmm.
However, it does not require you to be an expert on the subject matter. As a white person, you will never be the subject matter expert on race relation.
Never.
However, what you can be is a voice to denounce racism. That does not require research. That does not require time to process what this message looks like. And honestly, I think that right now there probably are a lot of businesses who are spinning their wheels trying to figure out wording that won't get them attacked, trying to find wording that just feels good. But then there's also some businesses out there who are not a part of the movement and who are hell bent on keeping things the way they are. It just is what it is.
Right.
But I would tell any business that has not spoken up, that is an ally, and that supports the movement of eliminating racism in our industry, you have to say something. To be quiet and to post pictures of you traveling and to post pretty inspiration pictures, whatever you're posting, if you have not made a statement against racism in this industry, you are jeopardizing the integrity to me of your business. And unless that's your intention, then I think you need to get on the ball and say something. It does not have to be several paragraphs of well scripted words. It just needs to be a message from your heart that represents your honest sentiment. And anybody can do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. And that kind of ties into the question, what can allies from other communities do to support the movement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my things is, there are so many wonderful Black businesses who have their business licenses and have insurance, all the things that, I've heard comments about, a lot of Black businesses aren't set up right. That is not true across the board. No more would it be true with any other population or group of people. So I would say the best thing you can do is support their businesses, support our businesses. Have a conversation. I'm not saying add someone blindly to your preferred vendor list, but sit down and understand what their business practices are and what their client experience is. And I'll be willing to bet you that you'll be able to add diverse candidates, and particularly African American vendors, to your vendor list so that they can enjoy the same events and participate and have the same platforms and opportunity to generate income. Also, support Black conferences or minority conferences. Be the vendor there to let the communities know that you're there to support them. Buy an ad in a Black publication. You have Muna Lucci, you have Black Bride, you have the Bee Collective. There's so many avenues where you can market your services to Black people. You can, advertise your services to brides and to other businesses, and also attend continuing education where you might be a speck in the room. It's okay, and that might be uncomfortable, but the education is still great. So find opportunities to be uncomfortable, to engage in conversation and support Black businesses in a way that has not been done before.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. My husband actually went to the Muna Lucci conference in Barbados, I think.
Yeah. Hmm.
And yeah, he was a speck in a room, and but again, we're okay with that. That's kind of how we've always been. But he loved it, and Muna Lucci is a wonderful organization to work with too. So it was
Yeah.
it was great. Yeah.
Yep. So we have to just seek those opportunities,
Yeah.
actively seek and be intentional about where we find the face of our business. Is our businesses only at majority conferences, or are we ever in spaces where we're the minority? So those are the questions to ask when picking who to support and what to support and where to go, where else to go.
Where else to go? I love it. I love it. I've been really just watching you and looking at my questions. So I'm just taking a peek at some of
Yeah.
these comments here. Noma says, finally, real, honest, raw conversations are starting to happen. It's been a leap forward.
No, thank you, Noma.
Thanks, Noma. Let's see. Michelle says, how hard is it to put a headline on your website? It says Black Lives Matter. I changed ours in a heartbeat. You're either in or you're out. Silence is being complacent. Now is not the time.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
And let's see. Teresa says, thank you, Bron. I always enjoy hearing you speak. Thank you for lending your amazing voice.
Thank you, Teresa. It's always a pleasure. I recognize your name.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this has been such a great conversation, Bron. Thank you for
Absolutely.
doing this with me. Where can people connect with you?
Absolutely. So I would love to have people, of course, follow us on Instagram as the Unity Through Community movement continues to gain steam and headway in eliminating racism in the events industry. So you can always follow us at the Flower Guy Bron on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and all social media outlets. But I also have a very unique Facebook community called The Village, and it's a motivational community for wedding and event pros. And it consists of all different backgrounds and services. And the goal there is to unify us and to learn more about services and experiences so that we can become a more unified community. So I'd love to have you join me on the movement and keep in touch.
I love it. I did have another question that just came in from
Sure.
Veri. She
Yeah.
says, did you ever do another event at the venue where they are aggressive towards you?
Let me tell you, I'm so glad you asked that, Varee. I had an inquiry for the same venue and at a very high caliber price, a very high price point. The wedding is supposed to be in January. I got a recent email. I want to say maybe right before COVID-19 happened, and from the bride that said that they were now choosing to go in a different direction and they had paid their retainer, a substantial retainer. So I don't know what happened, but I find it very ironic that someone was willing to leave a substantial investment with me to go in a different direction at that venue. So I can't say what happened, and I won't put that as a do not work venue because I need to be represented there. But it was pretty ironic that an investment was left at that venue in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Bron.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have anything that you want to close the show off with before we
Always,
move
I could talk forever. I want to thank everyone listening, and I hope that you all have the opportunity to share this very positive conversation. I think that anyone that is tuning in is showing and demonstrating that they are having the conversations with themselves and that you're starting to do the work within yourself. And all I want to do is just encourage you and be a resource as you join the movement and what that looks like for you, but I want to be a resource for you all. So if you need anything at all, know that I'm behind you 100%. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bron. And yes, please, guys, this is really an important conversation that we're having right now. Your support means a ton. So if you can share the Facebook video, the YouTube video when it goes up, I'll be posting this on IGTV. There will be a podcast. So just however your people consume content, please share it because I think it's great, even if they're outside of the industry. Because again, this is, I feel like, a really great conversation. It's very positive, and it's just us all working together to make our world a better place for all of our little ones. That's what I really, really want out of this at the end of the day is I want this world to be freaking better than what it is right now. We need it.
And we're headed in that direction, I believe.
I believe it too. So thank you so much, Bron.
My pleasure.
You're just wonderful. And again, I'm so jealous of the way you speak. I've talked about that before. I love that you were a teacher and it just flows. It's just great.
Well, thank you so much. It's well rehearsed. This is not just by happenstance. Yes.
I love it. Well, guys, this is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your support. I hope, again, that you share the heck out of this episode. And I hope that you tune in for our next show. I have no idea what it's going to be. I haven't gotten that far in my life right now. But so stay tuned. And again, contact me if you have any questions. And in the meantime, I hope you all stay safe and stay healthy. Have a great day. Bye, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.